You guys, welcome to Pistons Talk Podcast post-game show. Hope you guys are having a great Wednesday night. Before we do get into this podcast, just a small favor I ask you guys if you are watching live on YouTube or you do listen to the podcast on the audio side, make sure to like this video as you guys are coming in. And if you're a podcast listener, giving us a 5-star review does help us out quite a bit. But let's get into this post-game podcast and go over these quarter notes, and then we will open up the show to questions and answers like we usually do. So with the first quarter, something I noticed right out the gate is Indiana wanted to smoke. They came out super aggressive, and I felt like the Pistons weren't ready for the 7 o'clock tip. They really didn't get locked in, I felt, until the second quarter. And that's kind of been a theme with this team. They don't come out the gate right away ready to play. They had switches with Miles Turner tonight that I just didn't agree with. Like putting a Tobias Harris and a Miles Turner, I understand from a coaching perspective why you would want to do that. But Miles Turner is way too talented to switch with Tobias. He was still getting his threes. He was still banging down low in the post, getting easy baskets. There's even times where Cade Cunningham was switched on to Miles Turner just because you didn't want to put Jalen Duren in that situation. We know for a majority of this season, Jalen Duren has struggled with perimeter bigs, power forwards and centers. And I think that was kind of the thought process. I really didn't like it. But I understand it. You're kind of limited the way the roster is currently constructed. Pacers doubled Cade, and I think that was something that we should get accustomed to. The way teams are game planning for Cade now is they're pressing him, they're double teaming him, picking up at him at full court. Even though the Pacers didn't have Andrew Nebhart, who gave Cade problems last time, they still had defenders to throw at Cade. And you look at the box scores, Cade had over 30 points tonight, but it was definitely working early on. When they took the ball out of Cade's hands, the ball movement was very sticky. It was a lot of isolations, really tough jump shots in the first quarter. Malik Beasley, I felt, really helped calm them down a little bit. He hit, I believe, 4 3-pointers in the first quarter alone. And he kind of got them within 10. Eventually the first quarter was only a 7-point game, but Malik has just been such a presence for this team throughout the season, a big contributor off the bench every time he checks in, kind of like a microwave type of player. We're going to talk about Isaiah Stewart. Just mentioned that him and James Johnson both got double techs. Don't know what was said because the cameras on the FanDuel side weren't pointed in that direction. Malik hit a 3, and then Isaiah Stewart is jawing with the Pacers bench. So I don't know what was said. I have no idea. I don't think anybody knows. But Pacers shot over 60% from the field in the first, and they dropped 40 points on your Pistons. And that was the first quarter, basically. So Indiana 40, Detroit 33. Transitioning into the second quarter, the Pistons came out just lacking energy in that second quarter and just awareness. Too many times they were very lackadaisical with their passes. TJ McConnell had multiple steals with just bad passes, trying to get the ball to Cade Cunningham. Isaiah Stewart got ejected, laid out Thomas Bryant, just elbowed him straight up. And I just got done listening to the postgame with JB Bickerstaff that FanDuel does after every Pistons game. And he had said that there were things that escalated that to the point where Thomas Bryant was talking to Isaiah Stewart in a way in which it had nothing to do with basketball. It was very personal. And for you guys that don't know, Isaiah Stewart and Thomas Bryant actually know each other. They've worked out together, AAU circuit. So there is some history there. So I don't know what Thomas Bryant did. He kind of flopped a little bit, veteran move, got Isaiah Stewart. And ejected within that game. And I was wondering how chippy this game would get. I didn't know that we would have an ejection that early on. No more Stu for the rest of the game. Cade got got a technical foul for arguing on a block call. Tyler Ford was just not having it from JB Bickerstaff or Cade Cunningham tonight. His whistle was getting blown like crazy. He just did not want to hear from the Pistons tonight. The Pistons did come back, though. They trailed 20 points in that second quarter after Stu got ejected. Cade got teed up, and they got it down to a 10-point lead at halftime. So the Pacers dropped 74 points on the Pistons at halftime. Pistons had 64. Coming out of halftime, Pistons came out with much better energy. Defensively, I thought it was a quarter where, they put good possessions together. And this was a 4-point game at one point. They just could not score baskets to get it tied or eventually get that lead. Cade looked to be more aggressive, looking for his shot, but Indiana just hit timely three-pointers, got to the free throw line throughout the game. End of the third quarter, 102-96. And going into the fourth, fairly close game. There were spurts where the Pistons kept this within a 6-8 point lead throughout the fourth quarter. But, things got chippy again. Once Hardaway and Pascal Siakam got tied up, it seemed like the Pacers really just put this game away. Tyrese Halliburton hit a three. Did the Malik Beasley shimmy, looked at the Pistons bench, and Miles Turner hit his threes. Pascal Siakam was getting to his spots at will the entire night, and the Pistons drop another game to the Pacers, 133-119. So I had to look this up. So this is the first 3-game losing streak that the Pistons have had this season since November. Now, we witnessed a 28-game losing streak last season with the Pistons. The fact that they have not had a 3-game losing streak since November, good progression. They're learning how to win. They have 2 more games this week. They have the Dallas Mavericks and the Chicago Bulls. I think those are both winnable games. It's just you have to come out ready to play at 7 o'clock. I thought the third quarter was probably their best quarter out of the game. They played well, I thought, for a good 17, 18 minutes out of 48. But, overall, this road trip was going to be tough, having Cleveland, then Indiana, 2 Eastern Conference teams that are winning at an extremely high rate, especially Indiana. Indiana's been one of the best Eastern Conference teams over the last month and a half of just stringing together wins. That's a good basketball team. I know we probably don't like the antics with Tyrese Halliburton. We don't like the antics with Siakam or even Miles Turner for that matter. But those 3 guys defeated the Pistons with just the way they scored, the way they just dissected our defense tonight, and got to tip your cap to them. But, overall, this game was a lot of high emotions, a lot of shit talking among fan bases throughout the night, especially on Twitter. It's a lot of toxic stuff, some stuff that I would never say to a fan or even wish on a player. Saw some Pistons fans wishing ill of Pacers players are getting injured for the year, which I will never do that. It's just so classless. But overall, I like this competitiveness, this kind of fake rivalry, because we really don't have that in the NBA right now. It's a lot of buddy, dap ups after the game. Just felt like, playoff intensity basketball. And I'm here for it. And I think that's what the Pistons are trying to bring back. They're trying to establish their identity. They're going to be a scrappy, hard-nosed defensive team. And obviously tonight just wasn't our night. When you have vets like Tim Hardaway Jr. only scored 3 points, it's not good. Tobias did have 19, but on 19 shots. Cade had 30, and a better shooting night. His past 2 games, shooting the basketball hasn't been the best, but I think that has more to do with how difficult his shots have been over the past 2 games, especially the way he's being guarded, doubled, triple teamed. But overall, I'm not going to come up here and act like the sky is falling and we should panic. We have the trading deadline. It's January 29th as we're recording this video. The trade deadline is over February 6th. So I think these rumors are going to start to heat up. There are new players each and every day that are going to be in trade talks. And I understand that. I'm sure you guys understand that too. I think you guys are very frustrated with the way in which we haven't addressed getting a secondary ball handler, maybe a secondary scorer next to Cade Cunningham. I get it. I think these past 2 games, you have really noticed what Jaden Ivey could provide to this team. As much as these teams are doubling Cade, if Jaden was healthy, you'd have to pick your poison. Jaden Ivey would definitely help this team, but obviously he is hurt. He's probably out for the year, but there's still a lot to be proud of with this basketball team. I'm done talking about the game. I do want to open up the show for comments, questions, overall thoughts. Could be about this game, could be about the trading deadline, maybe players that you're looking at for the Pistons to possibly target at the deadline. What I want you guys to do right now is drop them down in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. And we'll have a conversation right after I'm back from a short break. But I just got to take a little sip of coffee and we'll be right back, you guys. Okay, you guys, we are back. I actually got a comment from Nate Myers. He said the coffee breaks crack me up. Sip on Cam. We all know you're ripping a blunt off Cam. Haha. I have not probably smoked weed since high school, and I graduated in 2011. So no, I can't smoke weed anymore. You guys don't know this about me. I'm a very relaxed person by nature. When I did smoke, I got 10 times lazier, and that's just not good for me. I can guarantee you it's just straight up coffee right here. There's nothing in it, no liquor, and nothing. I can't do that. I can't function. I can barely go out drinking and like freaking recover the next day, but I doubt you guys care about me smoking or drinking. But let's get into these questions. Nate, I appreciate the comment, my brother. Got a comment from the original 123 kid. We need to stop getting easily frustrated. It's leading to losses. I think this is easier said than done because what we see on TV, we don't get to hear what these players are saying. It would be really like wild if they just like had a Pistons Pacers game mic'd up, because you know that they'd probably have to just scrap that audio because there's no way it would like make the airwaves on the FCC because you know there's some disrespectful shit like, going down and talked about. But I would just say to this comment, easier said than done, because I know there's a lot of shit talking. I know like we watched Stu get ejected and we're saying like, man, like what is he doing crashing out? Like what is he doing like forearming or punching someone and getting ejected? Like we need you on the court. We don't need you getting into it with fans. We don't need you getting into it with Thomas Bryant, Siakam, and Halliburton. Like I get it. I'd be frustrated too. I was frustrated when I saw it, but after JB said that Thomas Bryant was being a little bit disrespectful, saying things that as a man you probably wouldn't tolerate. I would assume that Thomas Bryant said something that crossed the line. But overall, I get it. I get it. Beef Stew became easily agitated and got tossed early in this game. He did. He did, Cruza. It's been a thing with him where like he wears his heart on his sleeve, and I love that about him. But there are instances where we don't know what is said, and we don't know what ticks him off, and we don't know like what buttons these players try to push with him. Um, and Thomas Bryant and him know each other, so I don't know what he brought up, what was said, like how disrespectful was it really. But like overall, like him getting ejected was definitely a swing of this game, but it was a good sign that the Pistons could have kind of just like said, it's not our night. Stu's in the locker room. We're down 20 anyways. Like, let's just call it a game. But they fought back. They got within 4 after this was a 20-point game. So this team continues to fight and be resilient. And I think that's something that we didn't get to see last year. Growing pains are hard. We have team's attention now. And for the love of God, get us another ball handler. I agree, Chuck. Great points. Growing pains are hard, but like I'll take a 3-game losing streak versus what we went through last year. Like this is the first 3-game losing streak since November, and it's January 29th. Like think about that for a second. Like this team, if they lost a game or two, they went back on a little, 2-game winning streak, 3-game winning streak. We had a 5-game winning streak this season. So this team has shown the ability to bounce back to get into the win column. We do have team's attention now. I think the way that the Pistons have played, they're scrappy, they defend, and they don't give up. They were down 20. They still found a way to make this a game. And to get another ball handler, I think that is something that they will try to address it at the trade deadline, Chuck. I really do. I think when you watch these games and when Cade is not on the floor, the ball movement is just non-existent. It's just like, hey, Malik Beasley, we need like 3 3-pointers in like 2 minutes to get us back in this game, right? Like we need a secondary ball handler. I know Sasser has been put into that role, and he's done a serviceable job right now, but we need someone that's a little bit more proven, a little bit older, been there, done that before. Like I'm going to drop a name right now, and I don't know if Minnesota would trade him, but like Mike Conley would pique my interest if I'm a Piston fan. He's a little bit older. He's a veteran, but I feel like if you were able to get like a Mike Conley type on the Detroit Pistons, it would make a whole lot of sense for them. He played with Memphis. He's got playoff experience. He's got a low assist to turnover ratio. He can set up the offense. Yeah, he can shoot from the outside. I know he's like way past his prime, but those are the type of point guards that I would possibly try to target if I'm the Detroit Pistons. Don't know if Minnesota is willing to punt off on Mike Conley. I'm sure he's a very important piece in that locker room for Minnesota, but he's a guy that I would definitely have my eye on if I'm a Detroit Piston fan. I have a comment from Bayern. Would you guys gamble on Julius Randle? The contract is still around 30 to 33 million. So I know during the offseason when the Knicks traded for Karl Anthony Towns, the Pistons tried to acquire Julius Randle. I don't know if you guys do remember that. That was a thing. My thing with Randle is I think it would be a bad fit in Detroit just for the fact of he's a low post center. He's not really a player that I think Cade would mesh well with. You want that lane open up as much as possible. I feel like with Randle, he would clog the lane. I think if you're looking for bigs, Brian, you're looking for bigs that can stretch out the floor a little bit, or at least hit a 15 to 18 footer, like elbow jumpers. I don't really think that a Julius Randle, he does put up good stats, but it hasn't really contributed to something where if you're a Piston fan and you're looking at the contract, I don't really think it makes a whole lot of sense. He's a name though. And this front office tried to trade for him. So maybe there is still something there. But for me, just for me personally, in my opinion, I don't think it would be a good fit. But hey, I could be wrong. It's just my opinion. You may think Julius Randle would be a great fit on the Detroit Pistons. Who would I like to see fitting here the best and has a future with this core? Clarkson or Sexton? Ooh, that's a good one. Probably no to Clarkson just because of Ron, but all joking aside, I think Colin Sexton makes sense. Our guy Czar had mentioned Colin Sexton, and he made a lot of great points about it. Talking about how Colin Sexton played with JB in Cleveland. He's coming off the bench right now for Utah. So in the event that, Jaden Ivey comes back, you could just have Colin Sexton off your bench. He can initiate offense. He can distribute, really scrappy defensively. I think Colin Sexton makes a whole lot of sense. He just feels like a Piston. He feels like one of those scrappy defensive guards that would be out there in the trenches with Ron and Stu and Dern and all those guys. I think Sexton makes more sense fitting with the core. And JB has a lot of familiarity. There we go. With Colin Sexton. I like Clarkson, but after like that dust up with Ron, I don't know if they would try to trade for Jordan Clarkson. Look, Cade is a dog, but without a Robin, it will be really hard to win anything. I agree. If Cade is not scoring 35 points a night, this team has a hard time winning basketball games. You need flawless performances from all three of your vets. You can't have 2 out of the 3 of your vets give you a good 15 to 20 points. You need Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and Malik Beasley all to at least drop 20. And that's a lot to ask out of all your veterans. I do think that we have a Robin. He's just injured. Jaden Ivey is injured. Jaden Ivey and Cade, they were working this year. There were times where Jaden Ivey was winning games for this team. There's been games where Cade has won games for this team. I think this trading deadline will be very interesting to see what they try to do. Like, I know people have mentioned CJ McCollum. Like, do they pull the trigger for CJ just to try to get Cade secondary help as a number 2 option? Not really sure if they're going to pull the trigger on a move like that. There's De'Aaron Fox rumors going on now that the Pistons could be a third team to get involved in those trades because they have the cap space and open roster spot. So could you get maybe a role player from the Kings or possibly the Spurs to pair up with Cade? Like, this is just like complete crazy fan talk. I've seen it on Twitter. Like, people think that just because De'Aaron Fox has made it known he wants to go to San Antonio, do you try to get Chris Paul at his age? Don't know. Not really sure. Don't know if San Antonio wants to give up Chris Paul for De'Aaron Fox. I think it'll be really telling what happens at this deadline. I feel it will be a 3-team trade. The Pistons make a lot of sense for a lot of these 3-team trades. Like, you're talking about guys like Zach LaVine may or may not get traded. Jimmy Butler's getting traded. Bradley Beal may or may not get traded. Now De'Aaron Fox. Like, the Pistons are in prime position to take advantage of this trade deadline market with their cap space. And I think there will be a lot of interesting players on rosters that we're not even considering right now. And I think that's where I'm looking at it right now is I believe Trajan is looking for a certain archetype. He's looking for a certain type of player to mesh with this roster currently. But it'll be really interesting to see what approach they take. Like, do they just get a backup point guard and be satisfied with it? Or do they kind of take a risk? try to go for that CJ McCollum to get him secondary help. Like, I think everything we've heard of them saying we want to be buyers, but we also would be open to be facilitators. I think they're kind of dipping their toe in the water and seeing what's out there. And they'll make their best judgment come this deadline to see how they can improve this basketball team. Red Baron, they need to make a call to Chicago and Milwaukee and see what they want for Ball and Portis. Now, we talked about Lonzo Ball a couple days ago. He's a guy that has been in the news. I know Evan Sedry had made a report that Lonzo Ball is on the radar out of a lot of teams, and the Pistons were one of the teams named. Lonzo Ball makes so much sense. He actually makes too much sense to the point where I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Maybe it's just like these past 4 years of, Troy Weaver and the past regime, not going after guys that would make basketball sense. I have to kind of retrain my brain. I'm saying you got a new regime. Trajan seems like a really smart guy, really calculative guy. Could you go get Lonzo Ball? I think so. He's on an expiring deal, about $20 million. He makes a whole lot of sense. It's just the health thing with me has me concerned. Like, how many games are you going to get out of Lonzo Ball? How healthy is that knee? How durable is he? Like, if you were to trade for Lonzo and he only gives you 10 to 15 games, it's probably not worth the trade. Bobby Portis, though, Red Baron, it's another name that we talked about last week. He makes so much sense just from the standpoint of he's exactly what Pistons fans have been screaming for, a stretch four, can play some defense, and he feels like a Piston. He feels like if you were to look at a player, whether you want to trade for him, whether you want to sign someone in free agency, he kind of just checks every box of what Pistons fans look for in a player. Scrappy, can defend, talk shit, score, be impactful. Like, everything Bobby Portis does, I think fits Detroit. Now, I would let fans know, don't look at his numbers this year and kind of dictate your opinion on him, because what you have to understand is the way Doc Rivers is using him right now versus the way Mike Budenholzer was using him are completely different. Mike Budenholzer was more offensive driven, so his numbers looked a little bit better. Doc Rivers uses them in different situations, different scenarios, but I think the way JB could use him is he could either start or come off the bench as a backup power forward. And I think there's so much value there. I think what the Portis talk, from what I've read, my understanding is this would have to be a Jimmy Butler trade, because the Bucks aren't actively shopping Bobby Portis, right? This would have to be a thing where it's a multiple team trade. Bradley Beal, waives his no trade clause to go to Milwaukee, and the Pistons getting like a 4 or 5 team trade and land like a Bobby Portis, right? That was like kind of like a trade proposal from like Kevin O'Connor, and there hasn't been like any type of like the Bucks are shopping Bobby Portis report. It's just been like pure speculation from Bill Simmons and Kevin O'Connor. If that was like a player that was available, the Pistons should definitely be knocking on the door. I think Lonzo is realistic, especially for where the Pistons are at, but it really depends what the Bulls want to do. Like, are the Bulls content with just being the 10 seed and just saying, screw it? Like, let's see what we can do with the deadline. Or are they going to say, you know what? Like, let's try to upset someone in the play-in because they're the 10 seed right now. We'll get to a couple more comments and questions with you guys. And I know, like, this time of year, you guys just love talking trade deadline, everything like that. Ryan Donnelly, Sasser needs to work on ball handling. He looks sloppy when it comes to playmaking and ball handling. Yeah, you know what's funny about that? It's like they're almost playing him out of position, Ryan. Like, Marcus Sasser's not a point guard. Huh. Yeah, the ball handling is sloppy because he's better playing off ball. It definitely is a thing where the Pistons don't have a backup point guard. They never addressed it this summer. And they told Sasser, we're going to use you as a backup point guard. We know you're better at scoring, off ball. And we've seen lineups where Sasser is trying to initiate the offense and Cade's playing off ball, which I think is just an experiment by JB right now. But like, man, I like Sasser, but I think the best version of him is playing off ball, catch and shoot, letting him score. Let him focus on scoring. Trying to facilitate and play make and bring the ball up the court, I just don't think it's his strength. But he has gotten a lot better since summer league. But like that's not really saying a whole lot. Will Green, Ao DeSumo over Lonzo. Yeah, I'd love Ao, but like I don't think the Bulls are going to trade DeSumo right now. I think they'd rather, if they did want to trade someone, Lonzo, because he's on an expiring. But overall, I don't know what the Bulls are going to do. I don't even think the Bulls know what they're going to do. It's really weird, like with what they're doing, Chuck Brewer, 1 year, 10 mil for Chris Paul. Yeah, like that's what I've seen. Like Pistons fans obviously looked at the De'Aaron Fox stuff and like how they could get involved. Like I wouldn't mind CP3. I think he's a perfect vet for Cade, honestly. But at this stage of his career and like where he wants to be, I don't know if he'd be okay from going to San Antonio to Detroit. He probably would want to go play for a contender. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens with this De'Aaron Fox, San Antonio stuff. But it's weird. Samurai, I'd love to see Zion in a Pistons uniform. Listen, I think Zion is going to stay in New Orleans. If there was one player that the Pelicans probably trade, it's going to be Ingram. And I think he goes to the Raptors. I think the Raptors are to the point where they're in a rebuild, and I don't really think they want to be in a rebuild. They have young players. They have veteran players on salaries that could help out the Pelicans. I think Ingram probably ends up in Toronto. If the Raptors are really just going to pull the trigger, there's a report today that they want to get Scotty Barnes more help. Maybe Ingram to the Raptors helps them do that. But, the Pelicans are weird because it's like they'll probably keep Zion. DeJounte Murray, I think that's kind of their mess that they have to deal with. They traded a lot to get him. They're not going to trade him so fast. CJ makes sense because there's a relationship there with Trajan and everyone else on that Pelicans roster. But I think Zion in Detroit would just be a disaster, not from a basketball standpoint, off the court standpoint. If you know, you know. But I don't think the Pelicans are going to give Zion up. I just don't. Does the league use Mikal Bridges trade haul as a benchmark for how many picks it would take to get someone of those borderline all-stars? If so, we're screwed. I don't think so. I think the Knicks were just desperate, Red Baron. I honestly think that when you look at the Knicks situation, they saw how good Jalen Brunson was, and they just overpaid. They overpaid for Karl Anthony Towns. They overpaid for Mikal Bridges. I think they even overpaid for OG Anunoby. They were just going all in. They had the draft capital. They had the assets, and they're like, screw it. Like, we'll overpay for all these guys because we feel that we have a player that we're going to build around in Jalen Brunson. And they had complementary role players like Josh Hart and Isaiah Hartenstein last year. Obviously, they lost Hartenstein in free agency, but they're still one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. I think for the Pistons standpoint, I don't think that's the benchmark. I think the Pistons can get good value for players. Like last year, we saw Simone Fontecchio get dealt for a pretty cheap price. And there were contenders out there that were willing to, pay more for him. And obviously, Danny Ainge didn't want to deal with contenders because they didn't have as good as draft picks as the Detroit Pistons currently do because they were a rebuilding team. I honestly think when you're looking at like players this deadline, I think Detroit holds a lot of the cards just because of their cap space and open roster spot. And I think if a lot of teams want to make these blockbuster trades, most likely the Pistons have to be involved just because they have the most possible cap space to work with. But I'm probably going to end this podcast. We've been on for about 35 minutes. I do want to give you guys some news throughout the week. This Saturday, we're going to have Hunter Patterson, who does cover the Detroit Pistons, on the podcast on Saturday. We're doing a Saturday podcast versus a Sunday because the Pistons play the Bulls on Sunday at 3 o'clock. So we'll probably do a post-game podcast after that Bulls game. But I just wanted to give a little PSA. We'll have Hunter Patterson on this Saturday. We're going to be talking about trade deadline, Malik Beasley stuff, and much more. But I just wanted to give you guys just a little heads up. We've been on for almost 40 minutes, so I do appreciate all 44 of you guys in here. If you could do me a favor on the way out, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed already, definitely hit that subscribe button. We push out tons of Detroit Pistons content throughout the week, 365, 7 days a week. You guys know that. Like, I don't take any off days. Like, even in the summer, I'm making videos every day. But with that being said, we'll see you guys throughout the week. I think they play the Mavs next, so we'll have a post-game show after the Pistons are done playing the Mavericks at home. But until next time, you guys, take care. Go Pistons.